All right, well, it is 5:31 and we're gonna go ahead and get started. So, aloha everybody, mahalo for joining us tonight. My name is Sarah, and as always, I will be your trusty MC this evening. This month, we are really excited to be joined by Dr. Courtney Klepac of Stanford University's Super Reefs project and the Hopkins Marine Station. Tonight, she'll be sharing developments in discovering and protecting heat resistant coral species in Maui. And she was just here. I actually got to meet her. I had the pleasure of meeting her in person at MOCME. So while she was on the island, her work focused on the Olowalu Reef for its cultural and ecological significance and importance. And in collaboration with local practitioners, the team, while they were here, was able to test over 250 corals along West Maui to find some of the most heat resistant species and reefs. So we're really excited to have her tonight. And before we get to introducing Dr. Claypeck, tonight's presentation is part of Maui Nui Marine Resource Council's monthly Know Your Ocean speaker series. If this is your first time with us, welcome. We do want to mahalo some of the organizations and the people who support our work for Maui's marine environment. We would like to mahalo the County of Maui for partnering with us. And we also want to mahalo Maui Skydiving, one of the newest local businesses to support the work. And so we just want to send a shout out to Maddie St. Louis over at Maui Skydiving. Mahalo for your support and for your partnership. As a quick side note, if you haven't already signed up for our monthly newsletter, which is how we get the word out about events and webinars like this, we'll be dropping some links into the chat and you can go ahead and sign up to be notified anytime. So make sure you sign up for that if you would like to continue to get updates. And if this is your first introduction to Maui Nui Marine Resource Council, we are a nonprofit, local nonprofit working in Maui for clean ocean water, healthy coral reefs, and abundant native fish. We've been doing this since 2007, and we know that, on an island, everything is connected from the mountains to the ocean. And so that means that the work that we do to protect the marine environment takes place all over the place from the mountains to the ocean. And so working Mauka to Makai means that we do things like testing water quality conditions at 39 locations across the island, doing dives to monitor how healthy our reefs and fish species are, and most recently certifying properties and landscaping professionals to be able to use non-toxic natural alternatives to conventional landscaping products and practices, because we know that chemicals, sediment, so much of that can be traced back onto land, impacts our reefs. And so we're excited to share that we're launching our second cohort of our reef-friendly landscaping certification course. And today it actually works out really well because today is the last day to enroll. And something special about this time around, I guess you could say, is this time it will be 100% online. It is self-paced. The last time we did this, the first time, it was a hybrid in-person slash online combo, but this one is completely online. And so it's perfect for landscape professionals or property owners or agricultural businesses that, they're all busy. And so if an online option is just better for their schedules, this is a great opportunity. It runs from today all the way to October 2nd. So you can find more information at mauireefs.org/RFL. Feel free to share this with your friends. Feel free to share it with your landscaper. And we also want to send a big mahalo to all of you who came out last month to our pohana at Ocean Vodka. It was so nice to see so many of you in person, meet some new friends, see some familiar faces, and just have some good food and watch a really great sunset. So thank you guys for making the trip out there, and we look forward to hosting more get-togethers. If that's something that you guys are interested in, like, let us hear from you. We definitely want to plan more of those types of events. But mahalo to everybody who did come out and support us last month. So then just a few notes before I introduce our speaker tonight. We are having, as usual, we have time at the end of the talk to have any question and answers. So throughout Courtney's presentation, please use that Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to submit any questions, and we'll go ahead and read them out loud, and then have Courtney answer them at the end. We are also live streaming to Facebook, and so if there's anybody joining us there, like feel free to type out your questions, and those will be relayed back to me, and we will get through as many as we can within the hour that we have set aside for this. Yeah, and so now for our speaker. We have Dr. Courtney Klepac with us tonight. Courtney completed her BS in marine biology at Texas A&M University and her MS in biology at Florida Atlantic University. She has a PhD in ecology and evolution from Old Dominion University. And if that's not impressive enough, she has over 10 years of experience examining the effects of local stressors and ocean warming on the health of coral reefs. Her research has recently transitioned towards the conservation and restoration of heat tolerant corals. And in Florida, she worked with the restoration organization More Marine Laboratory, and that was to inform and assist in proactive coral restoration interventions using identified heat tolerant corals. She's now at the Hopkins Marine Station at Stanford University and is the Pacific Director for the Super Reefs project, which seeks to identify and characterize coral reef habitats that will be more resistant to ocean warming. She trains and collaborates with local students and researchers on coral tolerance experiments to understand how corals will respond to future climate change and to identify tolerant corals that can be further protected or used in restoration. So we are so lucky to have her joining us tonight. So Courtney, mahalo for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Sarah. It's like, wow, yeah, I feel quite accomplished. But yeah, a lot of school, a lot of hard work, but it's taken me to really cool places. And specifically in Maui, where I was just last month. So I want to open up the floor and say aloha mai kako and mahalo for joining tonight. I am really excited to share with you all our Super Reefs project and the three organizations at the bottom, the Nature Conservancy, Stanford University, and Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution make up this Super Reefs Alliance. And I want to, before I begin, I want to just let everyone know if any of you, we did host an open house at Maui Ocean Center Marine Institute or at the Maui Ocean Center.
Courtney, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but you're
Uh-huh.
you're showing us the version with all of your notes. So you might just need to
Oh, that's
switch.
okay.
I know you have two screens.
No, you're good. Thank you for that. In practice, let's try this one. Do you see it now? Or is it the same?
Nope, that's perfect. That's the right one.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyways, before I begin, I just wanted to give everyone a heads up that I am going to essentially give the same talk that we gave at our open house. So if you saw it, you can stick around and see it again. I've got some updates for our results. But if you haven't seen it, please stick around. And I'm going to dive into our Super Reefs project here in Maui, where our goal is to discover and protect heat-resistant corals. And before I begin my presentation, I want to give a huge mahalo to all of our partners, in addition to the three partners of the Super Reefs Alliance. The past month, basically all the end of July and August, I was working closely with students from UH Maui College, partners from various conservation groups, and without them, all of this important work would not have been possible. So I want to give a special shout out to Dustin and Elenia from the Marine Institute at the Maui Ocean Center, Bree and Ken's from the Pacific Whale Foundation, Jill for inviting me to give this talk, and Liz from the Maui Nui Marine Resource Council, Katie with Ocean Quest, Tej with Kapuka Olowalu, Michelle and Heidi from Save Honolulu Bay Coalition, and Candlin, Daniel, and Michiko from the University of Hawaii at Maui College. And everyone that you see on the left was kind of the core team involved in this big project that we held. So thank you so much for all of your contributions because you were incredibly enthusiastic and dedicated and worked really hard, and I would hire you on the spot if I had the chance. Anyways, so let's begin. our world has been warming rapidly in the past century, and all about 90 to 93% of all that atmospheric emission heat, it's absorbed by our oceans, and our oceans can help keep us terrestrial beings cool on land. If it weren't for our oceans, our current land temperatures would be 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Like, that's unlivable, right? It's uncomfortable. Like, we could not stand it. Unfortunately, all those marine organisms have to deal with that increased amount of heat that's being absorbed. And in particular, our beloved coral reefs. And this map that you're looking at, it shows the amount of heat stress experienced by coral reefs last year during the fourth global mass bleaching event. And if you're a coral anywhere in those colors that are red, maroon, brown, pink, purple, those are like the high alert levels, and they're feeling the heat and they're definitely bleaching. So I'll dive a little bit into bleaching. And when the world is heating, now that the world is heating up, corals and coral reefs do not like it. They're quite sensitive to many stressors, but the greatest threat is bleaching events from these uncharacteristically warm waters. And what happens is the symbiotic relationship between corals, which are animals, and their pigmented algae that live inside their tissues, giving them their food, that symbiosis, that relationship breaks down under heat, and it literally leaves the corals white. And that's why we call them bleached. If that heat stress is alleviated soon enough, a bleached reef can return to a healthy state. Otherwise, if that heat stress stays and lingers too long, many corals essentially will starve and die. And you've probably heard about this in the news recently, and it's painting a really grim picture of the death of coral reefs worldwide and a bleak outlook on the survival of coral reefs in the near future. And as a result of these bleaching events, dying coral reefs, a lot of effort and upsurgence of coral restoration has begun. And so, all around the world, people are focusing, organizations are focusing on restoring these dying reefs. And many restoration projects have made great progress, putting thousands to hundreds of thousands of corals back onto these degraded reefs. But if we don't thoughtfully identify and incorporate heat or bleaching tolerance, then all of that time and effort and money to produce these restoration corals that you see in this little time lapse and replant those reefs will be in vain during bleaching events. So this is a time lapse that was taken in Florida last year. They had an extreme marine heat wave where the water got really hot, really fast. And the corals that had been grown up, so these are probably 2 to 3 year old coral outplants, they bleached and they died and they couldn't handle the heat. So I'm painting this really like depressing story for you guys right now, but I wouldn't be here talking to you if I didn't have a hopeful side to the story. And right now, there is this huge need to find tolerant corals, corals that will survive the increasing amount of bleaching events. And we can start looking in reefs that are naturally more warmer. So the good news is that there are still many corals in certain locations that are resistant to or can recover from ocean warming induced bleaching. So like in this photo, you can see that some corals are completely bleached white, while others, kind of their neighbors, different species, of course, still have their pigment, still have their color. These corals have, the ones that aren't bleaching, have either lived in a hot area for a long time, or they've recently acclimated or adjusted to rising ocean temperatures, giving them this increased heat tolerance, and possibly even a chance to survive future warming or future bleaching events. So wouldn't you want to go looking for these super corals? And how would you go about doing it? Waiting for the next bleaching event is going to take some time because I checked this year and Hawaii is in the clear. It doesn't look like there will be any bleaching happening, but we don't know when the next bleaching event's going to happen. Getting people together, coordinating teams to get out, monitor, find who's bleaching, who's not, is a huge effort. And so our group or our alliance has come up with this proactive approach to do so. So Super Reefs is an international collaboration between the Nature Conservancy, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, and Stanford University to combine our advances in science to finding these heat-resistant corals. And by scaling down our approach to scale up the discovery and protection of corals. We can predict where super reefs might be found. We can prove that heat resistant corals exist, and then we can protect these reef areas for future use and future protection. Our collaboration has been asked to search for super reefs across the Pacific. So we've gone to the Marshall Islands, we're going to Palau, and we just finished our Maui trip. And we've also done a project in Belize in the Caribbean. And our efforts to combine this simple, scalable, and rapid solutions to finding these heat resistant corals can be accelerated at the local level among local communities and hopefully spread to protect coral reefs that will survive future climate change and directly benefit the millions of people that rely on healthy coral reefs. So last month, we brought our Super Reef framework to Maui's coral reefs, and Hawaii is really unique and special. It's geographically isolated, and it's led to this like rich and unique diversity of marine species, where a quarter of the 7,000 marine organisms found in Hawaii's reefs aren't anywhere else in the world. So you have a really unique kind of cosmopolitan of coral reef creatures. And another thing, and I think most of you are aware of this, but I find it incredibly beautiful, is that the coral reefs in Hawaii hold this deep cultural and spiritual significance. And the sacred chant illustrates that deep connection between life on sea and on the land, emphasizing that our actions on land directly impact those marine ecosystems. Coral reefs are integral to Hawaiian culture and practices, but essential to life on the islands. And as the Kumulipo reminds us, without these reefs, the vibrant life of the islands we know would not exist. And coral reefs are vital to Hawaii's people and economy as well. They provide $13.4 million in annual food value, nourishing those fish for the fisheries that feed our communities. They protect our coastlines by reducing wave energy up to 97%. And about $1.2 billion goes towards tourism related jobs and income. And so it's really helpful and beneficial to those communities that rely on them. And despite that direct benefit, Hawaii's coral reefs have also been subject to increasing bleaching events. And in the past decade, Maui and the Hawaiian Islands have had two bleaching events in 2015 and 2019. Fortunately, these events have been spread out enough for corals to recover and rebuild. But coral cover has declined a lot and decreased. And so now conservation and restoration agencies are focused on protecting and regenerating these reefs so that they can continue to support those communities that rely on them. In addition to the global threat of ocean warming and coral bleaching, reefs also face local pressures such as overfishing and overuse, sedimentation, pollutants. And scientists have estimated within Maui and Hawaii that over 60% decline in live coral cover have occurred in some areas as a result of these local impacts and global warming. And so we do need to address both local and global threats, and it's essential for coral survival. So kind of narrowing in on Olowalu, while we focus and we recognize that Hawaiian reefs face significant challenges, our project, our Super Reefs project, provides hope by identifying and supporting the protection of thermally resilient coral areas. And the Nature Conservancy, along with the community members, have selected Olowalu as the site to help mitigate these threats and support the recovery of a vital marine ecosystem. And why Olowalu? Olowalu is a really large 1,000-acre reef. It's on the leeward coast, so it's protected from trade winds and large ocean swells, allowing for these big, slow-growing corals to build massive reef structures that have thrived for thousands of years. The Olowalu Reef has a stunning diversity of coral and marine life, including, I'm not sure if it's still around, but I know that they once had the largest known manta ray population in the US. Olowalu also has some of the highest coral cover and fish biomass in West Maui, highlighting its ecological significance as a very important reef ecosystem. It's also referred to as the mother reef, where it supplies coral larvae around Lanai, Molokai, and West Maui. And so during the summer spawning season, surface currents can carry these larvae to seed these other reefs. And it demonstrates Olowalu's high connectivity and importance as the super reef site. Olowalu also has an important community and economy aspect, which providing a lot of activities from surfing to diving to fishing and to commercial tours. So as you can see, Olowalu is quite important and has been chosen for several reasons, but community involvement and community support was paramount. And so efforts to preserve this iconic reef led to its recognition as a Mission Blue Hope Spot in 2017. Hope spots are scientifically critical to the health of our oceans. It was also selected as one of the 5 Hawaii priority reefs in the Division of Aquatic Resources Coral Bleaching Recovery Plan. So in 2022, the Nature Conservancy, along with the community support and engagement, proudly nominated Olowalu Reef to be part of the Super Reefs partnership. And I do also want to mention that there are other groups working alongside the Super Reefs project in Olowalu. And so I think that this kind of parallel information gathering and research on this really special place is going to be really important for its future protection and sustainability under climate change. But unfortunately, we need to have community-driven and science-backed marine management of the Olowalu Reef. And Olowalu currently lacks an established community group to lead this marine management planning. And so that's why the Nature Conservancy is trying to work together to bring representative stakeholder groups, including Olowalu residents, ocean users, state agencies, and conservation partners to build a plan for effective community-driven and science-based backed marine management. So then that way they can all collaborate together to secure the protection that they seek. And while the local and historical, observational, and traditional knowledge forms the foundation of this community-led planning, incorporating expert data like other projects, as well as the super reefs, can really combine to understand coral reef resilience, which is incredibly crucial. So the super reefs heat testing and modeling can offer key information that helps find corals and coral reef areas that can withstand heat. And that can guide where to focus our protection efforts and manage them effectively. And the data that we're trying to put together and our results and our findings can also support coral restoration efforts by identifying potentially ideal outplanting sites and providing some source corals. So now I'm going to pivot a little bit into, so that was kind of just what is the Super Reefs project? Why are we working in Olowalu? And now I'm going to kind of go into how we gather this essential information on temperature and coral resilience and how that can be fed back into informing management practices. So what makes a super reef? There are several characteristics of a reef that we are looking for as the Super Reefs Alliance. One of them would be an area of historical heat. So where on the reef are corals surviving extreme or really hot conditions? And can these corals survive future warming? We want to know what coral diversity and cover look like. We also are curious, is there presence of large coral colonies after the 2015 or 2019 bleaching event? Means that they've lived a long time and they have like a stress memory. And if they have a stress memory and they've survived, then that could be some important information on what makes them so special. Like I mentioned with Olowalu being a mother reef, larval connectivity is really important to look into because if we have heat tolerant corals in Olowalu that are seeding other locations, that means that heat tolerant corals are also moving around Maui Nui. And lastly, what kind of my bread and butter is these heat stress experiments to kind of validate and confirm the modeling and all of the other observational information. So I'm going to give a little bit. I am not the hydrodynamic modeler. This is everything out of Woods Hole, and they are amazing, brilliant people that work really hard to produce these hydrodynamic models. And so often many models of maps or coastlines or reefs, they're produced using satellite data, and they can offer a lot of information about an area, but it typically occurs at a resolution about 5 kilometers. 3 miles for those of us that don't know kilometers very well. And many reefs and coastlines are actually much smaller than 3 miles or 5 kilometers. And if we want to know anything about our reefs, like the temperature or larval connectivity, we need a model with more fine scale resolution. And so Wood's whole team, under the work of Dr. Ann Cohen, have combined in-water sensors with satellite data to produce these beautiful mesh layers. So you can see all those little triangles, and all those little triangles, each triangle contains information about that spot. And so they're producing these fine scale information where we want it and broader resolution. So when we move away from the coastline, those triangles get bigger because maybe we're not right now interested in the information that's more offshore. And so all those little triangles capture various temperature metrics and at the depth of the coral, which is also really important and very different from normal satellite imaging and modeling. So with these models, we can examine different temperature parameters, like where is it hottest during the warmest summer months of the year? And so this map of Maui shows us basically the left panel of temperatures is Fahrenheit, the right side is Celsius, for depending on which language you speak. And as you can see around Maui, the warmest months, or during the warmest months, the warmest regions kind of span just, I think that's north of Kaanapali down to Olowalu into Kihei. I mean, we know Kihei is hot, right? But when we zoom into Olowalu, we can actually see that there is small scale differences just in that small little area along the coast and moving offshore. And so then, the Woods Hole group and ourselves, we like to ask the question, is this where we're going to find those heat tolerant corals, those ones living in the red area where it's the most hot? We can also look into where it gets hottest during a bleaching event. So kind of the same map of West Maui, and this was from the 2019 bleaching. And you can see that although Honolulu Bay is typically cooler on average, even during the warm summer months, it got really hot during the bleaching event. And we also kind of looked down again at Olowalu, and Olowalu was also really warm during this bleaching event. Now, given that Olowalu is a mother reef and larval connectivity is an important feature in our Super Reefs project, the Woods Hole team also created this beautiful larval simulation. I'm just going to hit it right now so you can watch. Of course, it's going to be jerky, but it's on loop, so you'll catch it again. And so essentially, they created this beautiful simulation to show where the larvae, so the larvae are colored based on their starting location. So it's not temperature, it's just where they began and where they move over time. So you can see that depending on where the larvae originate, they actually end up in different areas, but they do get carried across to Molokai and across to West Maui. They also can model the success of larval sediment. So oftentimes, we'll be like, oh yeah, the larvae go here, but which ones are going to be successful? And so this map shows the percent successful settlement. And so 100% settlement is the brightest colors, and 0% settlement is zero. And essentially, what happens when corals release larvae, the larvae kind of passively drift until they wait for the right cue, the right timing, the magic, and then they settle and then they grow into a coral and a coral colony that we all know and recognize by our eyes. And so this is showing where the chances of corals settling and growing into new colonies can happen so that they can offer really informative information doing all of their really sophisticated work. So taken together, our team at Stanford and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, we consult over all these different temperature parameters and we find our target sampling sites. And we're aiming to encompass a temperature gradient, so kind of hot to cool. So in the Northwest region, we chose 4 sites. We chose Honolulu Bay, Mahinahina, Ka'anapali, as well as Mala from kind of spanning cold to warm reefs. And then we chose another 4 in the southern or the southwest region, North Olowalu, Olowalu Point, Middle Olowalu, and Coral Gardens, kind of focusing obviously around Olowalu since it was kind of our target priority area. And once our sites are selected and our permit through the Department of Aquatic Resources is approved, my team then arrives. And so we were there, like I said, last month to conduct our rapid bleaching experiments to find those heat resistant corals. Now, normally, whenever anyone is heat stress testing or testing for coral bleaching resistance, it normally involves research groups and they spend tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars in travel, personnel. They use custom made systems with these sophisticated instruments and measurements. It takes a lot of time, and then they typically leave without engaging with local communities or communicating their findings. And so we didn't want to be like that in this project. We've scalable. We've built these custom systems using streamlined and accessible parts. So everything you see here, each tank is less than 100, it's around, actually, it's around $100. And so we can drastically reduce the cost to run numerous experiments in remote settings. And so by using these coolers, I mean, we literally bought these coolers at Walmart. They're outfitted with pumps and a heater that are plugged into this temperature controller that's kind of hanging up there. We can literally work anywhere where all we need is access to seawater and a source of power. And so we established this really lovely partnership with the Marine Institute at Maui Ocean Center, and we were able to do all of our experiments back there in their coral lab. And the newest addition, and probably my favorite part about this project, was the inclusion and the involvement of local volunteers. Like I mentioned, everyone at the beginning, they helped us test for heat resistance. They prepared the coral samples, they entered data, they helped us the entire time. And I'm incredibly grateful for these new connections. And they were wonderful humans to work with. And so it was honestly a lot of fun, and I miss them all very much already. With these systems that we've constructed and we worked with everyone to do these experiments, we can test multiple coral species. So we can capture like the reef's heat resistance in a very short period of time. And how we do this is we expose them to multiple days of increased heat stress. And so when you look here in this little figure, it's basically the temperature increases rapidly in the course of a day, and then it's brought back down for overnight recovery. And so what we do is we subject the same coral pieces to the same heat stress. And we also have kind of like clone or kind of clone pieces from the same coral colony in ambient conditions or a control to serve as a comparison. And our experimental design kind of simulates a condensed bleaching event like what I showed you earlier. It looks very similar. The ramp up, it stays hot, and then it eventually cools off. And then every morning, so thanks to again to everyone, and I hope, I mean, it's a little jerky on my end. Hopefully it's smoother for you guys. But every morning before that ramp happens, we take photographs of the coral samples to compare their bleaching status to those unheated controls in order to determine how much heat it takes for those corals to bleach. And so what you'll see is we're taking photographs with this kind of like little photo box Lightroom. And after we take photographs, we also give the corals a visual bleaching score. So 1, for example, would be healthy, and 5 is severely bleached, like all white. And so what that looks like, kind of, this is what one of our photographs would look like. And so this is kind of near, our site is near mile marker 14. This is the cauliflower coral, and it went through temperatures up to 35 degrees Celsius, which is kind of, I want to say it's like mid to high 90s. So it's quite warm. And so when you look at this picture, each row that has a blue thermometer is the control. So unheated, happy, healthy. You can see they still have their pigment. The 2 rows, rows 2 and 4, have the red thermometer. Those are the heated corals. And you can see that we have some differences in bleaching responses. And each column and the twist tie kind of designates a different individual coral, so a different coral colony. So for example, colonies 2 and colonies 4, those outlined in the red boxes, they haven't really changed their pigment that much, at least in comparison to, for example, to colony 3, which is completely bleached by now. And so we're looking for those corals that aren't changing in color as much, and those are our heat resistant corals. And then we combine that information across species to understand the reef or the community level response to heat stress that we're applying. So for our coral collections, before we go out, it was such a joy and it was a beautiful chant. We did the chant Eho Mai to pay honor and respect to the ancestors of each place that we went and sampled at. And we were targeting 4 dominant coral species at all 8 of those reef sites. And so, depending on whether you know your coral jargon or not, we sampled the cauliflower coral, Poecilopora meandrina. We sampled the massive lobed coral, Paredes lobata, the finger coral, Paredes compressa, and the rice coral, Montipora capitata. So this is an image of my colleague Tiara Stark with the Nature Conservancy and I sampling a cauliflower coral. And what we do for every coral colony that we sample, we take a photograph of it, we attach a field tag so that way we can monitor it in the future, see how it's doing, see if there's any stress effects or future bleaching effects. We aim to sample less than 10% of the colony. So we only need 4 small fragments and a 5th small fragment to be preserved to do genetic analyses. So we try to take as little as possible for our experiments, and then we document as much as we can about that coral, like its depth, and we take GPS waypoints of it as well. So, like I said, we just wrapped up. I've been home for 2 weeks, but the beauty of working with everyone and doing those visual bleaching scores is that we can get results, rough results, relatively quickly. And so I'm actually going to show you some preliminary results from this work that we literally just wrapped up. I think they took the last measurements on August 30th. So we literally just finished this entire project. And so what I'm going to show you is bleaching rates. So to remind you, we're looking at the rice coral in capitata. The visual bleaching scores go from 1 healthy to 5 bleached. And basically the x-axis is time or over increasing heat stress. Each line is a different site. So remember, we sampled 8 different sites and those sites are colored as such. And so when we look at the rice coral, what we're looking for bleaching rate, if we want to find the most heat tolerant corals, we want corals that are going to take longer to bleach. So a lower bleaching rate. And for the rice coral, that would be this dark blue line is Ka'anapali, followed by North Olowalu, just north of Olowalu Point, as well as Olowalu and Coral Garden. So those kind of would be our top 4 sites that have the most heat resistance for rice coral. Now we can look at this for the other 3 species, and interestingly, we find slightly different patterns, but there is definitely a lot of overlap, especially in our Olowalu region. So when we look at the finger coral, the 4 most heat resistant sites, those that have a lower bleaching rate or a more flat line, or if those of you know your slopes, a lower slope. For the finger coral, that's going to be Honolua Bay. It's going to be North Olowalu again, mid or near mile marker 14, as well as Coral Gardens. For the massive lobed coral, P. lobata, it's going to be again Ka'anapali, North Olowalu, Mala Reef, and Mid Olowalu. And lastly, for the cauliflower coral, the most tolerant guys, see this yellow line, that's Mala. So Mala had the most heat tolerant corals, followed by Mahina, Mid Olowalu, and Olowalu. We still have a lot of work to do. We still have a lot of other things to look at, like those color analyses. And so this is just kind of a rough pass at what we're finding. So I wouldn't go to the conservation agencies right now with this information, but I did want to give you all a little teaser. And an exciting point is that a lot of our Olowalu sites are generally pretty tough. And so that's quite exciting. And the other exciting thing about this work, and this is the first time, like I said, I've been to several other locations, and this was the first time we actually got to save our corals in hopes that they would be used for restoration activities. So I mentioned there were control corals, the corals that didn't go through any heat stress. They were just kind of kept at the same temperature throughout. And so we kept those in hopes that they would be used as future restoration corals, because guess what? Their counterparts that went through the heat stress, we know what their heat resistance is going to be. And so by using more heat tolerant or heat resistant corals, that could bolster reef resistance against future bleaching events. Um, but I do want to kind of put a little caveat or a little like, flag out there. We don't have a set plan for them. So right now they are being held and taken care of by the staff at MOCMI, but we're really hopeful that local organizations or any agency would want to use them for future restoration efforts. So, and we can put those, I mean, again, depending on permitting and what's allowed, we can put and outplant corals of known heat tolerance to potentially reefs that are not doing so well, or we can put them back in and build up the amount of coral. So it was really nice to be able to reuse the material and not have to just discard them. So, this has been such an amazing opportunity for me to share my expertise with others and hopefully instill the desire to continue our work. And I would love for local students and practitioners to champion their future stakehold by becoming these on the ground scientists like they've already done for a little bit with us. And as a result, and I let them know this, but we left behind all of our testing and sampling materials. Obviously, you would have to get your own permit, but our hope is that our work continues at other reef sites so that we can learn about maybe there's more super reef sites, maybe there's more places that have heat tolerant corals, or that could be a priority for restoration. And so this is a photo from last year when we kind of came to do our original like Olowalu workshop, scouting, learning about the place. And we work with so many amazing teams and wonderful humans from around the world. And I'm incredibly grateful for these collaborations that have also become really long lasting friendships. So mahalo, and I will take any questions.
Thank you, Courtney. That was pretty comprehensive. You did so good. It was so
Thank you.
comprehensive. And we kind of like just got right through it. Like you mentioned, we'll go ahead and we did have some questions come in while you were presenting. So the first one is, thank you for sharing your work with us. This person was wondering where they can find more information on the Woods Hole models. Is there like a paper or something
Oh,
available?
yeah. I know that I'm trying to think how I can share this. I mean, maybe I can share it with Jill and Sarah, but
Mhm.
or you could honestly Google Woods Hole Super Reefs, because they have a dedicated website for their portion of the work. And yeah, I can't do them justice, I know. And they put out some fabulous products that would be really helpful, I think, in marine spatial planning. But that would be my guess of a starting place. And if you're curious, the the PI for that, or the lead of Woods Hole, her name is Dr. Ann Cohen, Cohen. And actually, what's interesting is that they do have publications, but nothing yet of Maui and the wider Hawaii. So you would have to stay tuned probably for another year or two, but I'm sure they will be putting something out shortly.
You. And then they had another question. Oh, a related one. Is there a website for Super Reefs?
There is. It's currently under construction, and so I don't know if it was obvious in the images of the tanks, but what we have here at Stanford is we have a 3D printer, and I have a little QR code, not the one that's on my screen. That's to get in touch with me if you're curious about emailing me or contacting me in the future. But I do have, it's called coralfuturesacademy.com, because I'm leading another project where we're doing training. And so, if you wanted the materials or the protocols to do our work, to learn more about our work, and even what my plan is to release the results when they're ready on that website as well. So, it's kind of a one-stop shop for things super reefs and training based. And so, it's called coralfuturesacademy.com. But again, it's under construction, so bear with me. It's my first time building a website.
Oh wow, that's you do it
Well, I
all.
mean,
You do
it's like
conservation, build
it's Google
websites.
Sites. It's Google
Oh, okay.
Sites. So it's like it's pretty basic. And yeah, basically I just want to have an online repository for how to do our work and how to find the results for your place and connect with me.
Gotcha. Another question, did you use the Hawaiian quota card for visual bleaching scores? I actually have one to show. I don't know if my Zoom background is gonna like
Put it in
oh,
front of your, there it is. I
yeah,
see
there you
it.
go. I actually happen to have one of these. Did you
You
use
know
that
what?
for visual bleaching
I wish I had
or what
it.
did you use or what did you use then and why?
I wish I had it because it would have made visual bleaching scoring much easier. And I wasn't aware that there was a Hawaii version. Yeah, I need to get me one. Because so basically, what we do is based on our experience of the corals that we've tested, we train others on what the visual bleaching score of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 looks like. However, if any of you are familiar with visual bleaching scores, it is totally subjective, totally what my brain thinks the color of the coral is. And anyone that worked with us found that it was definitely challenging at the beginning to figure out what's a one, what's a two, what's a three. But everyone got the hang of it really quickly. But I do recognize and wish that we'd had some kind of card. But moving forward, I think it's something definitely useful that I will integrate.
Awesome. Some similar questions, so I'm gonna
Mhm.
try to encompass everybody.
Sure.
So are there additional sites that Super Reefs are considering for future work? I know you mentioned there's kind of, you've been all over the place with Super Reefs. Is Are there any like in the queue or considering?
Is this Hawaii specific or around
No,
the
I mean
world?
just in general. I mean Hawaii
Okay.
specific, obviously, but
Yeah.
if not,
So Super Reefs project began in 2023. Yes. And so we have done we have finished the Marshall Islands, we've finished Belize, we just finished Maui. So all that's left on the docket is Palau. And unfortunately, the scope and mostly the funding really
mm,
only allows us to be in a place for 5 weeks. And so traditionally we were doing 6 sites, and I actually kind of was like, let's do more. So we had 2 sets of tanks, so that way we could do 8 sites in 5 weeks
mm,
versus
mm,
6. So we're
mm,
pretty limited, and because even though I said it's rapid, it still takes about a week for these corals to fully bleach or to get all of the corals to bleach before we start with the next site.
mm.
And so to answer the question, within Hawaii, no, not yet, but I think I would love for on the ground folks to continue. Like I said, all the equipment is there. Or, if you want to partner, collaborate, we can incorporate more sites either on Maui, because there were a couple of other places that they told us about, like Makena and oh, what is the Kealia Pond? Like there's a
Paleo
couple of
pond. Mhm.
Kealia Pond. There's a couple of sites that apparently have like really wonderful coral cover. And so,
Mhm.
of course, like me, I'm like, well,
Sure.
what's their heat tolerance? Like I want to go test them. So I think that there's absolutely the capacity to do more in Hawaii. And as for the Super Reefs project specifically, Palau's last on the list.
Got you. Another kind of set of similar questions. So, you kind of mentioned like local organizations taking over after initial work. I mean, right, like right now, MOCME is housing some of the control samples. So one of the questions was, if we wanted to participate in the replanting of coral fragments, would we reach out to you? Would we reach out to MOCME? And
That is a good question.
tagging on to that, are there any current examples of like a local community at any of the sites kind of, carrying on um post Super Reefs?
At the moment, no. And that's why I was like putting that as a plug-in. I'm like, if anybody wants to, I would reach out to Dustin Parody, who is kind of the choral director at Mock Me right now. So he would be your point of contact
Mm,
for because I think he's taking care of them. There is another project that's based in Olowalu, and it's called Restore with Resilience. It's
oh,
led by University of Hawaii and Kira.
mhm,
And I'm wondering if she wants to weave our corals into her project.
mm,
And so I'm going to reach out to her to see if she has any desire to use those coral fragments that are left behind. But um, essentially, for any type of outplanting restoration work, you'd have to do the appropriate permitting, get all the
yeah,
approvals through the correct channels.
right,
Um,
right.
and so I don't think you can't. I just think that, you'll have to, there will be a due
The
process
process.
before
Right.
you can do that. But I mean, I think, reach out to Dustin if you're interested, if you have funding, if you have the project in mind. I think that can help facilitate outplanting those corals. Absolutely. And I would love to see them get that out there on the reef.
Awesome.
Probably happier there too.
Than in a Walmart cooler, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Um, Another question. So thank you so much for sharing this great information with us. What's next for you with your research and site work?
Yeah, cool question. So actually, and I kind of mentioned it with the website, it's called the Coral Futures Academy. And we just received, in partnership with the Nature Conservancy, we keep teaming up with them,
We love
the
to.
Nature Conservancy in Polynesia and Micronesia to actually do this local capacity building. And so we got funding to give to the places, not for me. I mean, I got a little bit to go do the training. And so
Mhm.
essentially, what we're going to do is we're calling it the Coral Futures Academy, which is why the website is named that. And so, what the goal is to train a team lead in the Marshall Islands, Palau, and the federal states of Micronesia. And each of those leaders will learn how to do these experiments, learn how to set up a restoration nursery and do restoration. And then they will be on the ground doing the work with the team. And I will be kind of mentoring from afar with, obviously a couple of trips here and there to check in on
Right.
them. But yeah, it's super exciting because I think it's gotten to a point where we've learned a lot about coral. I mean, there's obviously still so much to learn, but we've learned a lot about corals and coral bleaching and coral
Mhm.
heat resistance. And what's next is we need to turn this information and the resources over to the people who need it and want it most.
Mhm.
And so, especially in those remote islands, the biggest thing is, for local capacity building is jobs. And so, a big part of this is creating the jobs, the infrastructure, and the resources so that they can do that kind of important work.
Hey, oh, just a couple more people coming in. When can we expect the genetic testing to come back from the extra fragments?
Oh, great question. So genetic testing takes a little bit, and I didn't go into it much, but I can now. Is so one, we want to confirm that who we sampled is the right species. Yeah. We also want to we can kind of look at their rough relatedness. So maybe those corals that are more heat tolerant are like siblings or cousins, and that would be really useful to know. And we also can look at those symbionts that live inside their tissues. The algae that give them their food can also provide, usually, some of them can provide a heat tolerance benefit.
Mm,
As well as the bacterial community. So think about our microbiome. Some of the microbes in our gut, some of us have tougher guts than other, and maybe that contributes to their heat tolerance.
mm,
So to answer the question, we have about 288 samples, and we need to first extract the DNA from those samples. And then once we do that, then our goal would be to target those different individuals, target the coral, target the algae, target the bacteria, find out who's there, and then connect it back
mm.
with our heat stress testing results. So the genetic stuff usually does take a little bit longer. And I mean, my pie in the sky, like if it was a dream world, it'd be like 6 months. So I'm going to say 6 to 12 months to cover my butt.
Um, okay, what seems to be the last question. Are there commonalities that you may have seen across heat resistant corals? Just, in you mentioned all these different sites. I mean, is there anything that like contributes to them? Are there just common traits? Like just, obviously we want more of these types. And
Yeah.
wondering if there's anything that you've seen.
Yeah, we're actually, because I'm able to kind of quickly look at these results in a rough way, it kind of illuminates some patterns that are emerging. And the first pattern that is emerging is, unfortunately, it's not all corals are going to pinpoint to one reef.
Mhm.
And we want that, right? We're like, oh,
Mm.
I want it to be Olowalu, or I want it to be Mala. But unfortunately, or fortunately, all the corals that we're testing are very different from one another. So we have branching coral species, we have these big mounding ones, we have encrusting ones. And each of them, so in the Marshall Islands and here in Maui, I've noticed that some corals that do better in some places do worse in others. And then the other species might do better in that place and not the other,
Mhm.
which kind of makes the whole protection a little bit more convoluted, a little bit more muddy to like kind of figure out. And so, but what can contribute to that or potential mechanisms, at least what kind of like my pet hypotheses are, is those usually the massive coral species, the Porites. Porites is Latin for porous. So
Mhm.
they have these really big skeletons, but the tissue, the alive coral, goes really deep into that tissue. So guess what? When the exterior is feeling the heat, underneath is still protected. And so that's why they're called stress tolerant because they have a big amount of tissue or energy to kind of survive and withstand heat stress. Whereas when you think about branching coral species, really thin tissues, not a lot of energy reserves, they feel that heat pretty quickly. And so that's why, and if you've seen anything from the Caribbean or when you see bleaching in that image I showed in one of the slides in my introduction, it's the branching corals that are usually the white ones. And
Yeah.
so we are finding that they are more temperature sensitive. However, we're still finding heat tolerance. It's just not in the same place that we're finding heat tolerance in those massives. So I think that's been the really cool finding is that, no coral is created alike
Yeah.
and responds alike, which makes it tough, but
Keeps
I
it
mean, I
interesting.
find it keeps it interesting. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that. That was the last question. I think we got through them all. Great questions, everybody. And I just want to, I think you kind of covered this, but just so everybody knows, there's that cool QR code in the corner. If you're interested in connecting or learning more about Courtney, just like scan that with your smartphone.
Yeah.
Like, so high tech. I thought it was really, really amazing. Well, thank you so much. Courtney, we appreciate you spending your taking the time to share with us and how exciting you were just here, so even more relevant.
Hmm.
Thank you for being with us. I know you're on West Coast time, so even more so.
Okay.
Next month, all of our friends, we will be featuring Maria Harvey, and she is of the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary, and she does large animal entanglement. She will share stories and dive into the history of response efforts when those events happen, and she'll also share strategies used by authorized entanglement responders. So if you ever come across, hopefully not, but if you ever come across an entanglement situation, make sure to join us. She'll be sharing some ways that you can help authorities, help the animal, and just learn a little bit more about that type of work. And for everybody who enjoyed tonight's talk, I did get a few emails of people who weren't able to make it. There will be a recording. It will go up on our YouTube channels. If you're on our mailing list, plug for the mailing list again. We always send out a recording once it goes up, so you can catch it one of those two ways. And then we also just want to say mahalo to our sponsors and our supporters for making this happen, for caring about our oceans, for caring about our reefs. So much work to be done, but so worth it. And last but not least, don't forget today's the last day to sign up for our reef friendly landscaping certification course. So feel free to pass it on, sign up yourself. It is 100% online and self-paced. So if that is a better way for you or your landscaper to learn, then this is definitely the opportunity for that. Just go to mauireefs.org/RFL. And that is it for tonight. Mahalo, everybody, for joining us. Thank you again, Courtney. We loved having you. We hope we'll see you back on Maui at some point.
Yeah.
We can visit. But until then, everybody, aloha ohiho. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you guys all next week. Good night, everybody.